Tantor Audio presents The Humor Code, a global search for what makes things funny, by Peter McGraw, Ph.D., and Joel Warner. Narrated by Peter Berkrot. Publisher's note. This audiobook is packaged with bonus material, which has been included on the first audio and MP3 CD. If you downloaded this audiobook in a digital format, please visit our website at www.tantor.com and type The Humor Code into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page, then click on PDF Extra 1. When prompted, enter the access code LAUGHTER to access the bonus material. Author's note. Portions of this book previously appeared under one or both of our bylines in various publications, including Wired, Wired.com, Westward Newspaper, Salon, The Huffington Post, Psychology Today, and our personal websites, petermcgraw.org and joelwarner.com. Please don't hold it against us. We were eager to spread the word about what we were up to. Humor can be dissected, as a frog can, but the thing dies in the process, and the innards are discouraging to any but the pure scientific mind. E.B. White, 1941. Let's kill some frogs. Introduction. People a lot smarter and more important than the two of us have pondered what makes things funny. Plato and Aristotle contemplated the meaning of comedy while laying the foundations of Western philosophy. Thomas Hobbes probed the issue within the pages of his momentous tome, Leviathan. Charles Darwin looked for the seeds of laughter in the joyful cries of tickled chimpanzees. Sigmund Freud sought the underlying motivations behind jokes in the nooks and crannies of our unconscious. None of them got it right. Yet for some reason, we think we can succeed where they all failed. Who are we? A dream team of Nobel Prize-winning scientists and Emmy-laden comedy writers? Not exactly. Let's start with my co-author, Peter McGraw, the so-called brains of the operation. An academic with an adventurous side, he's the guy who set this outlandish quest in motion. As a professor of marketing and psychology at the University of Colorado Boulder, he's obsessed with making sense out of insanity, order out of chaos. His university office is impeccably organized, with piles of journal articles and academic surveys, on topics ranging from the economics of gun shows to megachurch marketing strategies, arranged by subject, stacked in perfect columns, and labeled with orderly post-it notes. To try to understand the odd way the world works, he's circumnavigated the globe on a ship twice. He's just as exacting regarding his teaching techniques. Lately, before classes, he's been telling himself he's going to a big, exciting party to ensure his lectures are as energetic and engaging as possible. For a professor who goes by Pete instead of Dr. McGraw, stuffy and long-winded doesn't cut it. So, when he started contemplating what makes things funny and found that little about it made sense, that wouldn't stand, he had to find a nice, tidy explanation. Then there's me, Joel Warner, the more cautious half of our duo. As a journalist, I've always suspected that there's something about me that's not quite right. While my colleagues thirst for tips on dirty cops and city hall corruption, I prefer stories on real-life superheroes and beer-delivering robots. As an upbeat news hound, I've never been fully comfortable in an industry that relishes tragedy over comedy. Maybe I figure if I can help Pete solve the riddle behind the lighter side of life, I won't be so confused. We thought long and hard on how best to write this book. A third-person account. We asked Louis C.K. way too much about his physical anatomy. A god's-eye view of our hijinks. Pete's busy getting an exfoliation scrub when Joel gets chased naked out of the Japanese spa. We decided to go with my personal point of view. Pete naps, and I worry about dengue fever, as we fly into the Amazon in a Peruvian Air Force cargo plane, packed with 100 clowns. Considering our pedestrian backgrounds, it might seem unlikely that we can outperform some of history's greatest minds in our quest to crack the humor code. But we have a couple advantages. For one thing, we suspect we have the timing right. Although comedy has been around since the dawn of civilization, it has never been so pervasive and accessible. Comedians such as Will Ferrell and Tina Fey are among America's biggest celebrities. Satirical news shows such as The Daily Show and The Colbert Report have become news sources for an entire generation. Roughly a quarter of all television commercials attempt to be humorous, and the Internet has become a 24-hour one-stop shop for laughs. Everywhere you look, somebody is making a joke, which means those jokes have never been so easy to study. Plus, we have science and technology on our side. And we don't just mean we have Google. Aided by increasingly advanced technologies, scientists are piecing together the intricacies of the human condition. Psychologists are probing our unconscious motivations. Biologists are tracking down our evolutionary origins. And computer scientists are building new forms of artificial intelligence. While these efforts are helping to solve some of the universe's greatest mysteries, they could also help us figure out why we laugh at farts. Our plan, simply put, merges the best of both worlds, a mashup of science and comedy, two topics that don't always get along. We'll apply cutting-edge research techniques to the wide world of humor, while subjecting the zingers, wisecracks, and punchlines we've all taken for granted to hard and fast analysis back in the lab. Along the way, we aim to answer tough questions that are bound to turn heads of scientists and comedians alike. Do comics need to come from screwed-up childhoods? What's the secret to winning the New Yorker cartoon caption contest? Why does being funny make you more attractive? Who's got a bigger funny bone, men or women? Democrats or Republicans? What is, quantifiably, the funniest joke in the world? Is laughter really the best medicine? Can a joke ruin your life or lead to revolution? And most important of all, do the French love Jerry Lewis? As with all the best experiments, not everything will go as planned. There will be bickering, bruised egos, and yes, more than a few bad jokes. Still, we're confident that the two of us make a good team. Pete's got a way with data, while I have a way with words. Pete's willing to pursue his research in the most outrageous circumstances imaginable, while I have the wherewithal to keep us out of trouble. At least that's what we've told ourselves. To cap off our expedition, we'll tackle one final challenge, one that's either the ultimate high-stakes experiment or a scheme as harebrained as they come. We'll use our newfound knowledge to try to kill it on the largest comedy stage in the world. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Our journey begins, appropriately enough, with a setup straight out of a joke. Did you hear the one about the professor and the journalist who walk into a bar? 1. Colorado. Setup. We walk into the Squire Lounge just as the Denver Watering Hole is gearing up for its weekly open mic comedy night. Looking around, Pete grins. "This is fantastic," he yells over the ruckus, sounding like a field biologist who's just discovered a strange new animal species. The mirrored walls display awards for Best Dive Bar in Denver. The stench of industrial cleaner hangs in the air, and the sound of clanging beer bottles blends into the police sirens wailing through the night outside. The clientele sports tattoos and ironic mustaches, lumberjack shirts, and plastic-rimmed glasses. Pete is wearing a sweater vest. The professor sticks out here like a 6'5", 40-year-old sore thumb. He's also calm for someone who's about to do stand-up for the first time, or for someone who's been warned that this open mic is the toughest one around. As a local comic put it to me, if you fail at the Squire, you will not only fail hard, but then you will be cruelly, cruelly mocked. Rolling up the sleeves of his button-down shirt, Pete orders us a couple whiskeys on the rocks. This is a welcoming crowd, he cracks sarcastically. I'm soon ordering another round. I don't know why I'm the more nervous of the two of us. I have little at stake in Pete's stand-up routine. We've only known each other for a few weeks, but I'd like him to succeed. I fear that's not likely to happen. Pete's already working the room. He zeroes in on a woman by the pool table. She turns out to be another open-mic first-timer. "Did you think about your outfit tonight?" he asks. "I put this on so I look like a professor." He glances around the room. The neon Budweiser signs on the walls cast a bluish, sickly hue on the grizzled faces lined up at the bar. Turning back to the woman, Pete offers an unsolicited piece of advice. No joking about Marxism or the military-industrial complex. I'd stumbled upon Pete after having written an article about gangland shootings and firebombings for Westward, the alternative weekly newspaper in Denver. I was eager for a palate cleanser. I hoped that it wouldn't involve cultivating anonymous sources or filing federal open records requests. Yes, such efforts have brought down presidents, but I'm no 31-year-old Woodward or Bernstein. I'd rather find another story like the profile I wrote of a McDonald's franchise owner who used his arsenal of fast food inventions to break the world record for drive-through quarter-pounders served in an hour. Or the coffee connoisseur I'd followed to Ethiopia in search of the shadowy origins of the world's most expensive coffee bean. The expedition broke down several dozen miles short of its goal, thanks to caffeine-fueled bickering, impassable muddy roads, and reports of man-eating lions. When I heard about a Boulder professor who was dissecting comedy's DNA, I'd found my story. It's true, Pete told me, when I first got him on the phone. He'd started something he called the Humor Research Lab, also known as HURL. His research assistants, the Humor Research Team, a.k.a. HURT, were just about to run a new round of experiments. Maybe I'd like to come by and watch. A week later, sitting in a large white conference room at the University of Colorado's Leeds School of Business, I witnessed Pete's peculiar approach to humor research. 4 student volunteers filed into the room, signed off on the appropriate consent forms, and then sat and watched as a somber-faced research assistant dimmed the lights and played a clip from the hit comedy Hot Tub Time Machine. After 10 minutes of scatological gags and off-color sex jokes, the students filled out a questionnaire about the film. Did they find the scene in which the BMW keys were removed from a dog's butt funny? What about the line, "A taxidermist is stuffing my mom"? Or the part where a character breaks his catheter and sprays urine on everybody? The experiment, Pete explained to me, was the latest chapter in Hurl's attempts to understand what makes things funny. Other tests included forcing subjects to watch on repeat a YouTube video of a guy driving a motorcycle into a fence to determine when exactly it ceases to be amusing. Another exposed participants to a real-life ad of an anthropomorphized lime peeing into a glass of soda, then have them drink lime cola to see if they thought it tasted like pee. For someone like Pete, there was nothing unusual about this research. Over the course of his relatively short career, he's haggled with casket manufacturers at a funeral directors' convention, talked shop with soldiers of fortune at a gun show, and sung hymns at a fundamentalist Baptist church in West Texas, all for the sake of science. His experiments aren't limited to his day job. The professor has a tendency to live his research, no matter the disastrous results. While he was working toward his Ph.D. in quantitative psychology at Ohio State University, a mentor invited him to Thanksgiving dinner. Pete offered to pay for his meal just to see the reaction to the obvious faux pas. Pete puts himself and others in uncomfortable situations to make sense of human behavior, or figure out why so much of it doesn't make sense. There have to be logical rules behind humanity's illogical decisions, he figures. He just has to find them. It's a way to keep control in an uncertain world, Pete told me the first time we met. Growing up in a working-class town in southern New Jersey, he sometimes faced the harsh realities of that uncertain world. Yes, there was always food on the table for him and his younger sister Shannon, but his single mother had to work 2 or 3 jobs, and sometimes rely on food stamps to do it. Yes, his mom took care of them, but her headstrong and forceful manner didn't always make her household a fun place to be. And yes, he sported high tops and Ocean Pacific t-shirts like the other boys in high school, but by age 14 he was working as a stockboy at the local Woolworths to pay for it all himself. Maybe that's why, ever since, he's always been determined to keep things tidy and under control. I could identify with Pete's compulsive tendencies, maybe more than I like to admit. In an industry populated by ink-stained schlubs and paper-cluttered offices, I come off as a tad neurotic. To streamline my reporting process, I've assembled a small, uber-geeky arsenal of digital cameras, fold-away keyboards, and electronic audio recording pens. In the Denver home I share with my wife, Emily McNeil, and young son, Gabriel, every bookshelf is arranged alphabetically by author and segregated into fiction and nonfiction. I'd say this drives Emily up the walls, but she's my perfect match, as orderly and organized as they come. In my world, unhappiness is a sink full of dirty dishes. Pete offered me an all-access tour of his scholarly world. He explained to me that a chunk of his research could be classified as behavioral economics, the growing field of psychologists and economists who are hard at work proving that people don't make rational financial decisions, as classical economists have long suggested. Instead, they discovered, we do all sorts of odd stuff with our money. While completing his postdoctoral training at Princeton, Pete shared an office with Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychology professor who helped establish the field. Kahneman's office would never again be so organized. But Pete's interests extend well beyond behavioral economics. He's not just interested in why people act strangely with their money. He wants to know why they act strangely all the time. A few years ago, he became fascinated by what could be the most peculiar human phenomenon of all. While giving a talk at Tulane University about how people are disgusted when churches and pharmaceutical companies use marketing in morally dubious ways, Pete mentioned a story about a church that was giving away a Hummer H2 to a lucky member of its congregation. The crowd cracked up, and then one of its audience members raised her hand with a question. You say that moral violations cause disgust, yet we are all laughing. Why is that? Pete was stumped. I'd never thought about it, he told me. He decided to figure it out. It doesn't take long for the Squire to fill up with patrons ready to cheer, or jeer, the comics tonight. Folks are soon packed in so tightly that the communal body heat overwhelms the slowly rotating fans overhead. Welcome to the Squire, cracks the night's MC, grinning into the microphone from the bar's cramped corner stage. It's the only place with an indoor outhouse. He follows the bit up with a joke about accidentally smoking crack. The room roars, and he turns his attention to 3 innocent-looking audience members who've unwisely chosen to sit at the table closest to the stage. Soon he's detailing the horrendous sexual maneuvers the wide-eyed threesome must perform on one another. The 3, it turns out, are friends of Pete's who thought it would be nice to cheer him on. As the MC introduces the first of the night's amateurs, Pete slips to the back of the room to look over his note cards. I'm worried my routine may be a little benign, he admits to me, as the comic on stage fires off a bit about slavery and watermelons. I pat him reassuringly on the back, but secretly I'm glad that I'm not the one getting on stage. I'm far from spineless, but anything I've done that would be considered gutsy has been under the guise of reporting. I've always been content being the guy in the corner taking notes, the one asking the tough questions, and not the one who answers them. When one of the comedians hears there's a Westward reporter in the house, he can't help but make a joke about the paper's numerous medical marijuana dispensary ads. It should just be a bunch of rolling papers, he ad-libs as the crowd laughs at my expense. I try, and fail, to turn myself invisible. Other aspiring comics take their turn at the mic, trotting out one offensive subject after another. masturbation, misogyny, Jim Crow laws, drug overdoses. It's Pete's turn. "This next guy isn't a comedian," says the MC, "but a moderately funny professor from the University of Colorado. Give it up for Dr. Peter McGraw." Pete bounds onto the stage and grabs the microphone from the stand, promptly disconnecting it from its cord. The audience goes silent as the professor fumbles with the device. Comedy 1, Science 0. Pete is far from the first scholar to dive into the wild world of humor. There's an entire academic association dedicated to the subject, the International Society for Humor Studies. Launched in 1989 as an outgrowth of an earlier organization, the World Humor and Irony Membership, or WHIM, the ISHS now includes academics from disciplines ranging from philosophy to medicine to linguistics, a group that has little in common other than a shared fascination with humor and a tendency to be snubbed by colleagues in their own fields for their offbeat scholarly interests. Altogether, they're a productive lot, organizing an annual international conference covering topics like the messianic tendency in contemporary stand-up comedy and did Hitler have a sense of humor? Founding Humor, the International Journal of Humor Research, a quarterly publication chock full of fascinating reads like The Great American Lawyer Joke Explosion and Fart Spottings, reflections on high seriousness and poetic passings of wind, and compiling the soon-to-be-released Encyclopedia of Humor Studies, a 1,000-page behemoth covering the whole of humor research, from absurdist humor to Jiaoyu, a humorous Chinese figure of speech. What's fascinating about the ISHS, though, is that its members can't seem to agree on a single theory of what makes things funny. It's not as if the experts don't have enough humor theories to choose from. Over the centuries, efforts have been made to explain why we laugh at some things and not at others. The problem, however, is that the world has yet to agree on the right answer. Plato and Aristotle introduced the superiority theory, the idea that people laugh at the misfortune of others. But while their premise seems to explain teasing and slapstick, it doesn't work for a simple knock-knock joke. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, had a different view. In his 1905 work, Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious, he argued that humor was a way for people to release psychic energy, pent up from repressed sexual and violent thoughts. His so-called relief theory works for dirty jokes. It's one of the few cases in polite society in which folks are at liberty to talk about their naughty bits. The theory also apparently works for Freud's own witticisms. In 1984, enterprising humor scholar Elliot Oring set about psychoanalyzing the 200 or so jests, riddles, and pithy anecdotes in Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious. He concluded that the famously private psychotherapist had hang-ups around money lending, sex, marriage, personal hygiene, and last but not least, Freud's self-described instructress in sexual matters, his randy old Czech nanny. Score 1 for relief theory. Still, it's hard to fit a lot of things people find funny, like puns and tickling, into Freud's model. It doesn't help that the rest of Freud's theory of the unconscious has been abandoned by research psychologists. Most experts today subscribe to some variation of the incongruity theory, the idea that humor arises when people discover there's an inconsistency between what they expect to happen and what actually happens. Or, as 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal put it when he first came up with the concept, nothing produces laughter more than a surprising disproportion between that which one expects and that which one sees. Incongruity has a lot going for it. Jokes with punchlines, for example, fit this model well. But even the incongruity theory falls short when it comes to tickling or play fighting. And scientists have found that in comedy, unexpectedness is overrated. In 1974, 2 University of Tennessee professors had 44 undergraduates listen to a variety of Bill Cosby and Phyllis Diller routines. Before each punchline, the researchers stopped the tape and asked the students to predict what came next. Then another group of students was asked to rate the funniness of each of the comedian's jokes. Comparing the results, the professors found that the predictable punchlines were rated considerably funnier than those that were unexpected. The level of incongruity of each punchline was inversely related to the funniness of the joke. There's another dilemma with all these theories. While they all have their strengths, they also share a major malfunction. They short-circuit when it comes to explaining why some things are not funny. Accidentally killing your mother-in-law would be incongruous, assert superiority, and release pent-up aggressive tensions. But it's hardly a gut-buster. It might seem that there's no way to cover the wide world of comedy with a single, tidy explanation. But for someone like Pete, a guy who yearns for order, that wouldn't do. People say humor is such a complex phenomenon, you can't possibly have one theory that explains it, he told me. But no one talks that way about other emotional experiences. Most scientists agree on a simple set of principles that explain when most emotions arise. It's generally accepted that anger occurs when something bad happens to you and you blame someone else for it, while guilt occurs when something bad happens to someone else and you blame yourself. It has to be the same for humor, Pete figured. There has to be a simple explanation that the authorities have long overlooked. He thinks he found it by doing a Google search for humor theory. One of the first results led to A Theory of Humor, an article published in a 1998 issue of Humor, the International Journal of Humor Research, written by a man named Thomas Veitch. Veitch posited what he called the N+V theory, the idea that humor occurs when someone perceives a situation is a violation of a subjective moral principle, V, while simultaneously realizing that the situation is normal, N. To prove that his idea worked, Veitch, who had a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania, laid out point after compelling point, meandering from computational linguistics to developmental psychology to predicate calculus. It's heady, compelling stuff, and to Pete, Veitch's theory was closer to the truth than anything he'd come across. But it hadn't rocked the field of humor scholarship. Why had Veitch and his N+V theory sunk into obscurity? While Veitch had once taught linguistics at Stanford University, he'd since dropped off the academic radar. It took several weeks of online sleuthing and unreturned voicemails to get Veitch on the phone from his home in Seattle. The N+V theory started with a simple joke, Veitch told me. Why did the monkey fall out of the tree? Because it was dead. I first heard it in 85 or 86, and I laughed for like an hour, said Veitch. That didn't make sense to him. So he thought long and hard about it, as he did about most things. Growing up, Veitch says, he was a loner who read every book in his grade school library. It was the first inkling of a prodigious mind that, according to Veitch, would later dream up the MP3 player long before anyone had heard of MP3s, and devise a phonetics chart that he believes can teach literacy to downtrodden people around the world. Before those endeavors, he decided to explain the dead monkey joke. So he sat down in his Stanford office one day in 1992 and came up with the N+V theory. The concept seemed to explain the joke. The lifeless monkey was a violation, but the situation was normal because dead monkeys will fall out of their trees. The premise seemed to work for every other kind of humor Veitch could think of, too. So, in 1998, he published his theory in Humor and waited for a response. And waited. And waited. And waited. It wouldn't be the last time Veitch's plans wouldn't go as expected. After his stint at Stanford, he tried to make a go of it in the business world, but his attempt to build a speech-synthesizing email reader fell through, as did Teachinary, a language learning program he developed. He's since tried other jobs: construction manager, carpenter, pizza delivery guy, plumber's helper. Veitch's tale seems like a testament to just how daunting a task it is to define humor once and for all. But his predecessor's fate hardly gave Pete pause. Veitch's theory engrossed him. As far as he could tell, Veach had nearly hit the theoretical bullseye, but something about it still seemed not quite right. Pete's department chair, Donnie Lichtenstein, summed up the problem when
Sample complete. Ready to continue?